Hello and welcome to Leaders of Tomorrow Masterclass, a series of digital-first conversations that we do, bringing the topics that are of most interest to you, the entrepreneur. I'm Sunanda Jayaseelan. Tonight, we're talking about the auto and the logistics space, calling out the big trends and the big opportunities for entrepreneurs in this industry and these industries and spaces. We're also talking about the long-term impact of the Russia-Ukraine crisis and how small businesses can better prepare for that. Let me quickly introduce the panelists who joined us for our masterclass. Vinkesh Gulati, President FADA. Anshuman Singh, Chairman and MD, Stellar Value Chain Solutions. Vineet Agarwal, Managing Director, TCI. Zeba Sarang, Co-founder, I Think Logistics. Akshit Bansal, Co-founder, Static. Experts joining us from across the transportation, logistics, and the auto space. And it's so good to have all of you here with us today. Zeba, gentlemen, thank you for taking the time. Before we go any further, though, while most of you are familiar faces, not just on Leaders of Tomorrow, but also commenting on your specific industries and are the experts really who are commenting on all the changes that are taking place, I do want to give our entrepreneurs the opportunity to really very briefly talk about your businesses. Zeba, let me come to you first. For our audience that is logged in live today, in 20 seconds, could you talk about the business that you do?
Sure. Thank you for having me here, Sunanda. Hi, this is Zeba Sarang, co-founder of I Think Logistics. We are an AI-based multi-carrier shipping platform. So it's like a single and simple tool to automate the e-commerce sellers' shipping needs.
Welcome, Zeba. Akshit, to you as well. Would you want to talk to our entrepreneurs about what Static does?
Hey, Sunanda. Hi. So at Static, we are building India's largest electric vehicle charging network. And we basically manufacture electric vehicle chargers, and we have the software for it, and people can find these chargers, they can remotely start and stop them, and they can pay for the usage. So basically, a lot of the electric vehicles use our energy to drive.
Fantastic, and good having all of you here with us today. Let's start by talking about the outlook for the different industries that are represented on today's masterclass for 2022, whether it's fiscal, whether it's calendar year. And I want to come to you first, Vinkesh, for the auto space for the fisc 2022. And while we'll discuss specifics in just a minute, just give us the outlook, because you have downgraded your view on the auto space from neutral to negative because of all the uncertainty that we're seeing. And when I say you, I mean FADA, of course. Just talk us through what perhaps some of the factors that are playing into that are concerned.
So, hi, Sunanda. Thanks for having me on the show. Overall, the auto industry is a very, very volatile industry, and we represent as low as the lower income class people and the higher income class when we report on the premium vehicles and the entry level vehicles and two-wheeler also. So overall, last year had been a bit better. We had seen some 7% growth. But if I compare it with the year before last, we have gone down by 25. And the major issue is that the 25% below is not even pre-COVID. So when we talk of pre-COVID, it's around 30-35% down. So overall, but one big thing is that we are going back on track. The growth is there, and a big push from the electric vehicle segment. What we are seeing is what the future for the Indian automation. But we are on the right direction towards talking about greener movement, mobility, and all that. So if I talk about the current fiscal 2020, we are hopeful that no doubt the full industry will still be a negative, but we'll see most of the categories seeing a bigger growth as compared to last 2 years.
Okay. Vineet, I want to come to you next and also ask for you to respond as far as the outlook for 2022 is concerned for the transportation and the logistics space, and also because you're someone who's so closely been associated with India's small businesses. What would you like to tell us?
Hi, Sunanda. Thank you for having me again. It's a pleasure to always be here. So I think, what is very clearly indicative that with GDP growth of anywhere between 7 to 8%, the logistics industry tends to grow at 1.25, 1.5 times of that. Yeah. So holistically, we are looking at a very good growth opportunity. There are, of course, a lot of trends in the logistics sector that is very visible beyond the fact that there is going to be GDP growth. The trends around online commerce, or that is the omni-channel shift towards omni-channel, the high growth in infrastructure or capital spending that is going to restart. The fact that there is a regulatory issues have become much better with GST coming in. And of course, the fact that companies are looking to outsource more and more of the logistics. So with all of these factors coming in, I think the outlook for the sector looks very promising. And though at some places we are already pre-COVID levels, but by FY23, we definitely think that the industry will see a positive outlook overall and will exceed not just 90 numbers, but also set records going forward.
Vineet is sounding highly optimistic. Anshuman, would you echo that sentiment?
Absolutely. Sunanda, thank you for having me here again. I would definitely echo that sentiment because we are seeing a lot of traction now, especially in the last 2 months after the third wave. A lot of things have come back to normal. In the COVID period, so the last 2 years have been a very mixed bag for the logistics industry. So e-commerce and a lot of online businesses grew. A lot of offline businesses, especially retail and fashion, had tough 3 waves because the shopping malls and markets were closed. But in the last 1.5 months, life is almost back to normal. And offline retail, fashion, malls, and all consumer products related to malls have taken off, and the sales are showing great traction. Even March was a good month. All sectors that we cater to, and we work with large corporates and all sectors, fashion, lifestyle, retail, automotive, pharma, and all the sectors are showing traction. So that's a very, very positive sign. And I believe that this will be a big year for supply chain logistics because all the pent-up demands will come in, especially in the omni-channel space, the non-e-commerce space that has seen very slow growth in warehousing. E-commerce saw a lot of growth, but non-e-commerce, the offline consumer businesses saw little or no increase in warehousing space because they were managing from the same spaces as inventory was not growing. But this year, we do see a lot of movement. Outsourcing as a subject is also seeing a lot of traction because organizations which did not outsource earlier did have some trouble in this period, and they're now finding outsourcing as a good option. And they're looking at players for outsourcing warehousing.
It's time for a quick break here on the Leaders of Tomorrow Masterclass. Back in just a moment. Let's talk about the theme for today's masterclass. That's a starting point, of course, for this entire conversation that we're having over the course of the next hour. And that is the ripple effect that we are likely to see here in India because of what's happening in Russia and Ukraine. We need perhaps to you first. What is going to be the cost for India because of what's going on globally?
So clearly there is an impact on Indian businesses, and that's very evident. The fact that we are seeing now some of the inflationary pressures coming about because of this war that's going on. So one is, of course, fuel. We know that it has created a global imbalance in terms of energy costs and energy distribution, which means that there is the impact of fuel. The high fuel cost will or the energy cost will remain for the next few months. Subsequent to that, there is, of course, certain kinds of commodities that were being exported by Russia and Ukraine, and they were dominant in many of those. So those will affect the supply chains, and you have to remember that the commodities are one part of that supply chain, because they could be providers of the larger unit that is needed. So it could be a small commodity, but it's the weakest link in that chain. So that will get affected. We're seeing impact on things like grain. Wheat has gone up through the roof. Beneficial for India in some ways, but leading to some food inflation eventually. So overall, the impact is quite deep and perhaps persistent for the next few months. It's not going to go away easily.
Okay. Vinkesh, I want to come to you. In fact, our first audience question is coming, but just before that, there's a severe impact, if I can call it that, correct me if I'm wrong, that the domestic auto industry, like other parts of the world, is likely to see because of what's happening in Russia and Ukraine, because of one, the semiconductor chip shortage, largely because of that, and then we'll come to some of the other factors. What is your advice for an entrepreneur who has logged in today, who's going to be watching this on the Leaders of Tomorrow on ET Now, about the impact that we're going to see, the cost that we're going to see, and how perhaps in some sense can be risk?
So Vineet had been right. We have been seeing this supply chain disruptions for long. And if an auto I talk about, we are seeing spins since the first lockdown. So for the past now around 2 years, we have been seeing shortages in all the premium vehicles, including electric vehicles also. So because the kind of numbers of semiconductor required for a car is now huge, and the kind of features what a customer wants. So overall, the supply chain has been a roller coaster since April 2000. So but something we were reviving a bit. So we saw good production in February and March, but obviously this war has again pushed us with uncertainties, which is a bigger problem. There's a lot of wait period. So, but this opens up the opportunity of people if they want to invest in something where they can support the supply chain and help us out in more parts which can be made in India than imported. Because as of today, if you see how the government has come up with a PLI scheme, obviously that's too big a scale to work on. But there are still a lot of parts. So on an average, around 40 to 50% of auto parts which are used in a car is still imported. So there is a lot of opportunities for smaller entrepreneurs and big entrepreneurs to enter into that. And if they can find a good technical JV with somebody outside who is already doing it and do it in India, that's a big future to go in. Because we are sure that India is, as of now, 4th or 5th car producer in world. We are looking in another 2 years, will be number 3. So thinking about the volumes which will be manufactured in India and the kind of advancement. So anybody who comes into this, he has a whole globe for it. He can export those also. So he has your domestic and export also there. So a big opportunity going further.
Okay. Akshit, speaking of opportunities, when today's masterclass started, EV was flagged off as one of those opportunities. How is this industry really reacting to what's happening globally?
Right. So first of all, what I would say is that EVs are getting more and more feasible. So if you see, there's technical feasibility now of the product. There's a lot of government push and there's a lot of consumer demand, right? And because of the pollution and everything. So EVs are becoming more feasible and technically viable, and there's a lot of demand. And for the same reason, we have seen like 100% growth in EV sales in India itself. And there were like around 10 lakh vehicles sold, EV sold, right?
Okay. This question is coming in for Vinkesh. Vinkesh, this question is, Vinkesh sir was saying 5th largest to becoming 3rd largest globally in terms of volumes. 1 or 2 things that is going to push that growth, and what is the specific opportunity for entrepreneurs?
So obviously, I'm talking about a specific on the car industry front,
Yeah.
because in two-wheeler, we are already the largest. The tractor, we are already the largest. Obviously, commercial vehicle and other space three-wheeler, we are still not in that base. The car industry, no doubt, we are seeing a growth. If we observe, even during the COVID year, only the 2021 was a year where we have seen a degrowth. Post that, today we are sitting at a minimum 3 to 4 months waiting period. You cannot get any vehicle if you go to a dealership across the counter. So that clearly shows the interest from which has shifted from two-wheeler to a car because of this COVID and health issues and self-care. So that is helping the car industry to grow. So that is the confidence we have that we'll surely see around 20% growth, 15 to 20% growth this year. And going further, this will always grow up, seeing the market demand and waiting period. On the what are the opportunities? Like I told you, there are still 40% plus items which are imported from across globe. I'm not saying specifically China. There are a lot of places we import from Malaysia, South Africa, and a lot of places. Obviously, the biggest thing for going further is what is happening is electrification. And if I talk of electrification, 60% to 70% items or parts or ancillaries are imported. So anything to do with that, if you as an entrepreneur want to get it, obviously, you'll have to research as well from which place, what is the technical collaboration you will need for going ahead. There are a lot of opportunity in auto in future, I'm sure.
Let me at that point actually take in our first poll question. Will the Russia-Ukraine conflict pose long-term risks for the automotive supply chain? Yes or no? Would love to hear from all of you. Okay, this question, next question from our audience member is from Nishant Singh. He says this question is for Vineet. Vineet, since you used to be ASSOCHAM president, my question is incentives for small businesses from the government. Not enough is being done for small businesses. PLI we can't participate in. What is the way out for us? Vineet?
So yes, clearly the small businesses are under a lot of stress, specifically with input prices increasing, demand also being stagnant in some places or also slowly coming back, as well as the contact sector, specifically hospitality, tourism, are actually in a very, very tough situation. So clearly, I think there is government is doing its bit, but there needs to be more that needs to happen, especially for the hospitality sector. The ECLG scheme has been expanded and also extended, so that is good. There is also a lot of other incentives. I think one needs to get to the Breads platform, for example, go to GEM, the platform, to see what are the opportunities available. And I'm hearing trends about some of the job work that happens from the large companies to the small companies also increasing quite substantially. So these things have started to come back. Small businesses need to digitize their businesses faster. There is no other alternative. They need to also be compliant again, because there is again no alternative, because if you want input credit, you have to be compliant, for example, and that will bring down your cost. Sure. So small businesses also need to start doing their bit simultaneously. And clearly from the government, we've always pushed for more and more incentives wherever possible for small businesses. And I think I'm hopeful that things will start changing, and they are changing now.
A couple of more questions coming in from our audience. Before we do that, though, I want to address the results of the poll. 65% of you have said yes, you're expecting long-term trouble as far as what's going on in Russia and Ukraine on the domestic auto space. 35% of course of you saying no. Okay, this question is coming to us from Sanjay. He says he's head of IT and he's a consultant at NAS Technologies. Sanjay, if I've understood your question right, you're talking about the increase in commodity prices and the impact it's going to have on jobs, businesses, and do businesses need to transform and how they can really transform. Not sure which industry specifically, NAS Technologies, or which industry you're talking about, Sanjay, but maybe I could ask for all of our panelists just very briefly, if you could talk to Sanjay and to any other of our entrepreneurs who might have the same question. Anshuman, would you maybe want to go first, or Zeba, would you want to take this as well?
I got it. In fact, it's a very interesting take. Companies which are involved, so basically commodity prices have increased in every single sector. Steel is up, energy is up, so oil is up, commodities are up. So every commodity is up. Companies which actually produce, for example, OEM auto manufacturers, or companies which produce goods for the end consumers, or even FMCG, all companies which sell to the end consumers, finally the end consumer is going to bear the price rise, because the price rise of all raw material inputs will be passed on to the consumer in the form of increased prices. So companies selling products to end consumers have an advantage. The prices will go up. The sales might go down a little because of the price increase effect, but overall the companies do not tend to lose, because the volume might slightly go down or remain the same, or may not grow to the extent that they had planned, but because of a price rise, the revenues still increase and the margins remain largely unaffected because the consumer pays for it. Supply chain industry is bearing the biggest brunt of the price increase, and that's not so readily possible to the corporates. The corporate in turn pass it to the customer. So it's a very interesting situation. Finally, the water finds its own level. A finally symbiotic relationship does develop, but in that interim period, there's a lot of chaos.
Completely out of time on the first part of the Leaders of Tomorrow Masterclass, talking about the impact as far as the logistics and the auto industry is concerned from the ongoing Russia-Ukraine crisis, but also what's happening here domestically in terms of inflation and rising fuel prices. Here's a sneak peek at what we have lined up in part 2.
The cost of logistics is not really coming down right now. I think there is a lot of things that need to be done, and we have to look at it more holistically and more from a long-term perspective as to how and when this cost will come down. It means that there has to be a shift towards things like multimodal logistics. It means that we have to have better packaging solutions.
There has been rise in air cargo prices because people like airspace which are available on Russia and Ukraine are completely shut. So logistic companies and carrier has to use a longer path.
Overall, India has only been on an upward trajectory in terms of productivity and the matrices that are followed for measurement of turnaround times, movements, costs at various ports, as well as on roads.